At their anniversary dinner, my parents announced a lavish Hawaii trip with the whole family. When I asked what time we leave, my dad replied, "You do not know because you are not part of us. You can stay behind and take care of the kids." What I did next shocked everyone and nobody could believe it. My name is Sydney. I am 34 years old, and I am the founder and CEO of a luxury vacation real estate fund. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to deal with a toxic family who constantly belittled your achievements and treated you like a stranger in your own home. Growing up in an affluent suburb of Chicago, I always knew my place in the family hierarchy. My father, Harrison, was a former banking executive who measured a person's worth strictly by their corporate title and the brand of their watch. My mother, Catherine, was a country club socialite whose entire existence revolved around maintaining a flawless public image. In their eyes, they had two perfect children and one massive disappointment. That disappointment was me. My older brother, Cameron, was the golden boy who went into corporate finance just like our father. My older sister, Melanie, married a wealthy man named Bradley and became the ultimate suburban mother, complete with a perfect house and two beautiful children, Mason and Lily. I, on the other hand, had decided not to pursue a law degree or a medical license. Instead, I started out as a real estate agent trying to build my own path. My parents never missed an opportunity to mock my career choice. At family gatherings, they would introduce Cameron as a financial genius and Melanie as a dedicated mother, while dismissing me as a glorified house tour guide. They had no idea that over the past decade, I had transitioned from selling modest suburban homes to managing high-end luxury properties and eventually founding my own highly successful real estate investment fund. I kept my wealth and my success completely hidden from them because I knew they would either try to claim credit for it or find a way to exploit it. The absolute peak of their cruelty happened just last week during my parents' 40th wedding anniversary dinner. They had booked a private room at one of the most exclusive and expensive Michelin star restaurants in the city. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the long mahogany table where my entire family was seated. Cameron was there with his wife Courtney, sipping vintage champagne and bragging about his latest bonus. Melanie and Bradley were discussing their country club memberships. I sat quietly at the end of the table wearing a simple but elegant dress, nursing a glass of sparkling water. I had paid for my own cab to get there because nobody had offered to share a ride with me. As the main courses were cleared away, my father stood up and tapped his crystal wine glass with a silver spoon. The room grew quiet as he smiled, looking around the table with profound satisfaction. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate 40 years of marriage with your mother and me," he began, his voice booming with forced warmth. "To mark this incredible milestone, we have decided to do something truly unforgettable. Next month, I am taking the entire family on an all-expenses-paid 2-week vacation to Maui." My mother clapped her hands together in exaggerated delight while Cameron and Melanie erupted into cheers. Melanie immediately started talking about buying new designer resort wear, and Courtney asked if they would be flying first class. I felt a sudden warmth in my chest. Despite years of being treated like the family outcast, a small, foolish part of me thought that maybe, just maybe, this was an olive branch. Maybe this anniversary trip was their way of finally bringing us all together to heal old wounds. "That sounds amazing, Dad," I said, trying to match their enthusiasm. "What time does our flight leave so I can clear my work schedule?" The entire table went dead silent. The sound of silverware clinking against porcelain stopped completely. My father slowly turned his head to look at me, his smile vanishing instantly. His eyes swept over me with a look of absolute disdain that made my blood run cold. "What flight?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "You do not know the flight details, Sydney, because you are not coming with us. You are not part of this trip." I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked around the table, hoping to see someone tell me it was a bad joke. Instead, I saw my mother rolling her eyes. I saw Cameron smirking behind his wine glass. "What do you mean I am not coming?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You just said you were taking the entire family." My father let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "We are taking the family," he said, emphasizing the word. "Cameron and Courtney are coming. Melanie and Bradley are coming. We have booked the most exclusive property on the island called the Azure Estate. It costs $50,000 a week, and it is for people who appreciate true luxury. We simply cannot afford to waste a ticket on someone who spends her days unlocking doors for people trying to buy cheap condos." Melanie leaned forward, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "Plus, we have a very important job for you here at home," she said smoothly. "Since you are single and your real estate hobby gives you so much free time, we decided you can stay behind to watch Mason and Lily. Bradley and I really need an adults-only vacation to reconnect. You can move into our guest room for the 2 weeks. Oh, and Cameron needs someone to stop by his house to feed his dogs and check his mail." I stared at my sister, completely stunned by the sheer audacity of her demand. "You expect me to stay home and be your unpaid nanny and housekeeper while the rest of you go on a luxury vacation to Hawaii?" I asked, my voice beginning to tremble with a mixture of shock and rising anger. My mother let out a loud, dramatic sigh. "Do not be so selfish, Sydney," she said, shaking her head in disappointment. "We have paid for your meals and supported you for years. The least you can do is help your successful siblings when they need a well-deserved break. You should be grateful we are trusting you with the children. It is not like you have any important corporate deals to manage or a husband to go home to. You are the only one with nothing tying you down." Cameron chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Come on, Sydney," he mocked. "It is a win for everyone. We get to enjoy the beaches of Maui, and you get to practice being a responsible adult by taking care of my dogs. Maybe I will bring you back a keychain if you do a good job." The humiliation was suffocating. They had deliberately brought me to this fancy dinner just to put me in my place. They wanted an audience to witness my degradation. They wanted to remind me that I was nothing more than the family servant, an afterthought, a burden they only tolerated when they needed free labor. I looked at the faces of the people who were supposed to love and protect me. I saw nothing but greed, arrogance, and a deep-seated desire to make me feel small. For 22 years, I had swallowed my pride. I had absorbed their insults. I had allowed them to gaslight me into believing I was the problem. But sitting in that extravagant dining room listening to them laugh at my expense, something inside me finally snapped. The scared, desperate girl who just wanted her parents' approval died in that exact moment. In her place emerged the woman I had secretly become, a woman of immense power, wealth, and absolute zero tolerance for disrespect. I did not cry. I did not yell. I did not cause a scene. Instead, I took a slow, deliberate sip of my sparkling water. I set the glass down gently and allowed a wide, genuine smile to spread across my face. The sudden shift in my demeanor seemed to confuse my father. He narrowed his eyes, clearly expecting me to burst into tears or storm out of the restaurant. "The Azure Estate in Maui," I said, my voice perfectly calm and measured. "That is a stunning property. It features a private infinity pool, a dedicated chef, and a pristine view of the Pacific Ocean. $50,000 a week is quite a hefty price tag for a retired banker, Dad." My father puffed out his chest, looking defensive. "I have my investments," he snapped, "and it is none of your business how much it costs. You will not be seeing it anyway. Just make sure you are at Melanie House by 8 in the morning on the day we leave." I reached into my designer handbag and pulled out my phone. "Actually, Dad, it is very much my business," I said, tapping the screen to unlock it. "You see, when I transitioned from selling modest homes to managing high-net-worth real estate, I created a rather successful portfolio. I opened my proprietary property management application." My family watched me with growing confusion. "What are you talking about?" my mother demanded. "Put your phone away, Sydney. It is incredibly rude to be texting during a family dinner." I ignored her and navigated to the active bookings section of my app. I scrolled down until I found the reservation under my father's name. I tapped on it, bringing up the full details of his extravagant Hawaiian vacation. "I am not texting Mom," I said, looking up and meeting her angry gaze. "I am working. You see, the Azure Estate does not just belong to any random management company. It is the crown jewel in the portfolio of the Luxury Vacation Real Estate Fund that I founded and currently run as the Chief Executive Officer." The silence that fell over the table this time was different. It was heavy, thick with disbelief. Cameron let out a nervous laugh. "What kind of delusional nonsense are you talking about?" he scoffed. "You do not own the Azure estate. You are a low-level broker." I turned my phone around and pushed it across the mahogany table toward my father. He leaned forward, his eyes scanning the screen. I watched the color rapidly drain from his face as he saw the administrative dashboard, the official company logo, and his own booking details staring back at him. At the top of the screen, my name was clearly listed as the property owner and primary fund manager. "It seems you booked your trip through my agency, Dad," I said, keeping my tone light and conversational. "I must say I am flattered you chose one of my properties to celebrate your anniversary. It really is a breathtaking place." My father looked like he had just been struck by lightning. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Melanie grabbed his arm, looking at the screen. "This is impossible," she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "This has to be a mistake." "There is no mistake, Melanie," I replied smoothly. "I have spent the last 10 years building a multi-million-dollar real estate empire while you all thought I was a failure. I bought the Azure estate 3 years ago. It generates more income in a month than Cameron makes in an entire year." Cameron's face turned bright red. "You have been lying to us," he demanded, his voice rising. "You have been hiding all this money while letting us think you were struggling." "I never lied," I countered sharply. "I simply stopped sharing my life with people who only ever used my words as ammunition against me. You never asked about my career because you were too busy telling me how worthless it was." My mother tried to recover her composure, forcing a tight, trembling smile. "Well, Sydney," she stammered, "this is certainly a surprise. But I suppose it works out perfectly. Since you own the property, you can just waive the rental fee for us as an anniversary gift. Family takes care of family, after all." The sheer audacity of her request was breathtaking. Less than 5 minutes ago, she had demanded I stay behind to act as a free nanny while they lived it up in luxury. Now that she knew I held the keys, she expected me to hand over a $100,000 vacation for free. "Family takes care of family," I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "That is an interesting philosophy, Mom. Unfortunately, you just made it abundantly clear that I am not part of this family. I am just the help, remember, and the help does not hand out free luxury vacations." I picked up my phone from the table. My father reached out as if to stop me, but he was too late. I looked directly into his eyes as my finger hovered over the screen. "Since I am not considered part of your class, and since you all view me with such incredible disdain, I have decided to exercise my right as the property owner." I pressed the bright red cancellation button on the application. A small notification popped up on the screen, confirming that the reservation had been terminated. A second later, my father's phone buzzed in his suit pocket with the automated cancellation email. "What did you just do?" he roared, half standing up from his chair. "I just canceled your reservation," I said, my voice ringing clearly through the private dining room. "The Azure estate is no longer available to you. In fact, considering your history of hostility and disrespect, I am officially banning you and everyone sitting at this table from renting any property associated with my fund. I suggest you start looking for a cheap hotel because Maui is fully booked for the season." Melanie let out a dramatic gasp, covering her mouth with her hands. "You cannot do this to us," she shrieked. "We already bought non-refundable plane tickets. The kids have been talking about this trip for months." "Then you better start explaining to your kids why their mother and grandparents ruined their vacation by being cruel, arrogant bullies," I replied, standing up from my chair. "And do not worry about your dogs, Cameron. I am sure you can use your massive corporate bonus to hire a professional pet sitter." My mother was hyperventilating, clutching her pearl necklace. "Sydney, please," she begged, dropping the commanding tone she had used all my life. "You are ruining our 40th anniversary. You cannot just walk away like this." I grabbed my designer coat and slipped my purse over my shoulder. "I am not ruining anything," I said, looking down at the people who had tormented me for decades. "I am simply giving you exactly what you asked for. A life completely separate from me. You wanted to leave me behind. Consider it done. Oh, and Dad, since I am not part of the family, I will not be chipping in for this dinner. Enjoy your expensive champagne." I turned my back on them and walked out of the private dining room. Behind me, I could hear the immediate eruption of chaos. My father was shouting at Cameron. Melanie was sobbing loudly. My mother was trying to shush them to avoid making a bigger scene. For the first time in my 34 years of life, the sound of their dysfunction did not give me anxiety. It sounded like pure unfiltered victory. I walked through the elegant restaurant with my head held high, ignoring the curious stares of the other patrons. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped out onto the bustling city street. I took a deep breath, feeling a massive weight lift off my shoulders. I had finally done it. I had cut the toxic cord that had bound me to their abuse for so long. I handed my ticket to the valet and waited for my car, feeling a sense of absolute peace. The nightmare was finally over. I had shown them my true power, and I had walked away on my own terms. The valet pulled my sleek black luxury sedan to the curb. I tipped him generously and slid into the driver's seat, ready to go home to the peaceful life I had built for myself. But just as I put the car into drive, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a high-priority alert from my personal banking application. I frowned, picking up the device. I had set up strict security measures on all my accounts, so a high-priority alert was unusual. I unlocked the screen and opened the notification. My blood ran completely cold. The message was from my bank's fraud detection department. It read, "Alert. A charge of $30,000 has just been processed on your primary personal credit card for a transaction with an international airline." I stared at the screen, my mind racing to comprehend what I was seeing. I had not booked any flights. My card had been safely in my purse all evening. There was only one way someone could have accessed those specific credit card details. Someone who had kept my financial information from years ago. The peace I had felt just moments before vanished, replaced by a sharp, dangerous anger. My family had not just insulted me. One of them had just stolen from me, and I knew exactly who was arrogant and desperate enough to try it. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, staring at the glowing screen of my phone. $30,000. The notification from my bank was clear. A pending charge for an international airline had just been processed on my primary personal credit card. My mind raced, trying to understand how this was even possible. I had not handed my card to anyone. I had not left my purse unattended. Then a deeply buried memory surfaced, hitting me with the force of a freight train. 5 years ago, I was rushed to the emergency room with a ruptured appendix. I was doubling over in agony, barely conscious from the pain and the heavy doses of medication they were pumping into my IV. My older brother Cameron had accompanied me in the ambulance, playing the role of the concerned sibling. When the hospital billing department asked for a credit card to keep on file for the deductible, Cameron generously offered to retrieve my wallet from my bag. He took my platinum card to the admission desk. He had full access to my name, the 16-digit card number, the expiration date, and the security code on the back. He must have written the details down or taken a photo of the card. My own brother had kept my financial information saved for 5 years, just waiting for a moment when he might need to use it. My hands shook with a mixture of absolute disgust and burning rage. They had just spent an entire dinner humiliating me, calling me a failure, and demanding I act as their unpaid servant. And the very second I walked out and cut off their luxury vacation, Cameron had the audacity to steal from me to fix their problem. I immediately dialed the emergency fraud hotline for my bank. Within 2 minutes, I had a fraud specialist on the line. I confirmed my identity and explicitly stated that I did not authorize the $30,000 airline charge. I instructed them to freeze the account, immediately decline the pending transaction, and issue a formal fraud report. The representative assured me the funds would not clear, and the card was now permanently locked. With the financial bleeding stopped, I pulled up Cameron's contact in my phone and hit call. He answered on the second ring. In the background, I could hear the muffled sounds of city traffic and my mother's shrill voice. They were clearly standing outside the restaurant waiting for the valet. "Well, look who is calling," Cameron said, his voice dripping with unbearable smugness. "Are you calling to apologize, Sydney? Because if you think a simple apology is going to fix the massive scene you just caused, you are sorely mistaken." I gripped the steering wheel tightly. $30,000, Cameron? I said, my voice dangerously low and steady. You just tried to charge $30,000 to my credit card for airline tickets. You committed credit card fraud. There was a brief hesitation on the other end of the line, but Cameron quickly recovered his arrogant tone. Oh, please do not be so dramatic, Sydney, he scoffed. I am your older brother. I just borrowed the card information for a temporary loan. You completely ruined Mom and Dad's anniversary dinner with your little power trip. I had to step up and fix the mess you created. I booked 5 first-class tickets to Honolulu on a commercial airline so we can still take our trip. I will pay you back when my quarterly corporate bonus hits next month. I let out a harsh laugh. You do not have a quarterly bonus coming, Cameron. I know exactly how your corporate finance firm is doing. Your company is hemorrhaging cash, and you are drowning in debt, trying to maintain a lifestyle you cannot afford. You did not borrow anything. You stole my identity. Before Cameron could formulate another pathetic excuse, I heard a rustling sound on the line. My mother, Catherine, had snatched the phone right out of his hand. Sydney, stop being so hysterical, my mother barked into the receiver, her tone sharp and commanding. Your brother did what he had to do to save this family's reputation. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it would be for me to go to the country club tomorrow and tell my friends that our grand anniversary trip was canceled? We had to secure new flights immediately before they sold out. I sat in my car utterly appalled by the words coming out of her mouth. Mom, I said, trying to force her to hear reality. Cameron committed a felony. He kept my stolen credit card information for 5 years and just tried to drain $30,000 from my account. That is not saving the family reputation. That is a federal crime. You are being ridiculous, my mother snapped angrily. We are family. Family does not steal from family. We simply share resources. You just stood in that restaurant and bragged about how you have millions of dollars and own luxury real estate. $30,000 is pocket change to someone in your position. You can easily afford to help your brother and your parents. You actually owe us for raising you and putting a roof over your head all those years. Stop being so incredibly greedy and selfish. Her ability to twist the narrative was genuinely terrifying. She was actively defending a thief because the theft benefited her social calendar. Now listen to me carefully, Sydney. My mother continued, her voice taking on a demanding, urgent edge. The airline just sent a fraud alert text to Cameron's phone. They put a security hold on the transaction because of the high dollar amount. They need the primary cardholder to approve it. Check your phone right now. You need to reply to the automated security text and press 1 to authorize the charge so the transaction clears. Do it right now, Sydney, or I swear I will never forgive you for ruining our family. I stared straight out the windshield into the dark city night. The sheer entitlement radiating through the phone speaker was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. They truly believed they could abuse me, belittle me, and then casually demand I finance their luxury lifestyle with stolen money. I am not pressing anything, Mom, I replied, my voice completely devoid of emotion. I am not authorizing the charge. I already spoke to the bank's fraud department. The card is permanently canceled. The transaction has been officially flagged as fraudulent, and the airline will not be issuing your first-class tickets. What did you just do? My mother shrieked, her voice echoing loudly in the quiet interior of my car. You fix this right now, Sydney. You call the bank back and you tell them it was a mistake. There was no mistake, I said coldly. And my next call is not to the bank. My next call is to the local police department to file a formal criminal report against Cameron for identity theft and wire fraud. You cannot do that, my mother screamed, panic finally replacing her arrogance. You are family. You cannot call the police on your own brother. It will ruin his career. It will destroy his life. You cannot do this to us. I did not do this to him, I stated firmly. He did this to himself when he decided to be a thief. And you did this to yourself when you decided to defend a criminal instead of protecting your daughter. Enjoy explaining this to your friends at the country club. I disconnected the call before she could scream another word. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat and took a deep, cleansing breath. The line had been crossed. There was no going back, no negotiations, and absolutely no mercy left in my heart. I put my car into gear and pulled away from the curb, driving straight toward the nearest police precinct. The night was far from over. and it was time for my brother to face the very real consequences of his actions. The fluorescent lights of the local police precinct hummed overhead as I walked through the double glass doors. I did not hesitate. I did not second-guess my decision. The lingering echo of my mother demanding I authorize a fraudulent $30,000 transaction had completely severed whatever invisible thread still tied me to them. I approached the front desk with a steady heartbeat and asked to speak with a detective regarding felony identity theft and grand larceny. Within 20 minutes, I was seated across from Detective Miller, a no-nonsense investigator who listened intently as I laid out the entire sequence of events. I handed over my phone, showing him the official fraud alert from my bank, the timestamp of the attempted airline charge, and the call log proving Cameron had contacted me immediately afterward to confess. I explained exactly how my brother had gained access to my platinum credit card during my emergency room visit 5 years ago, and how he had retained that information maliciously. Detective Miller took meticulous notes, his expression hardening as I detailed my family reaction. You understand that pressing formal charges for attempted wire fraud and identity theft of this magnitude will result in an immediate arrest warrant, he asked, looking me directly in the eye. This is not a civil dispute over borrowed money. It is a federal offense carrying severe consequences. I met his gaze without a single ounce of doubt. I want to press full charges, I stated clearly. He stole my financial information. He attempted to defraud my bank of $30,000. He needs to be held accountable to the absolute fullest extent of the law. I spent the next 2 hours filling out official police reports, signing sworn statements, and providing the direct contact information for my banking fraud department. By the time I walked out of the precinct, the night air felt crisp and refreshing. The wheels of justice were officially in motion, and I knew Cameron was entirely unprepared for the reality check heading his way. The following afternoon was a picture-perfect Saturday in the affluent suburbs. I knew exactly what my brother was doing because my mother had been bragging about it on social media for weeks. Cameron and his wife Courtney were hosting an extravagant 5th birthday party for their son. It was not just a child party. It was a highly calculated networking event. Cameron had invited senior partners from his corporate finance firm, wealthy neighbors, and various country club elites to his sprawling backyard. He had hired a professional catering company, rented massive inflatable obstacle courses, and booked expensive entertainment just to project the illusion of immense wealth. While I sat comfortably in my downtown penthouse reviewing investment portfolios alongside my incredibly supportive fiancé Gavin, my brother was about a dozen miles away, playing the role of the perfect successful family man. He was likely holding a craft beer, laughing loudly with his firm's senior partners, and acting as though he had not just tried to commit a massive financial crime the night before. I did not have to be there to know exactly how the arrest went down. Gavin had a colleague who happened to live directly across the street from Cameron. According to the play-by-play I received later, it was a spectacle of epic proportions. Right in the middle of the catered barbecue, when the backyard was packed with over 50 influential guests, 2 marked police cruisers pulled silently into Cameron driveway. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the expensive cars parked along the manicured street. 4 uniformed officers stepped out and walked straight past the balloon arches and the confused catering staff. They marched directly into the backyard, parting the sea of wealthy guests, like Moses parting the Red Sea. Cameron was standing near the outdoor kitchen holding court with his boss when the officers approached him. He tried to put on his usual arrogant charm, asking the officers if there was a noise complaint. Instead, the lead officer asked him to confirm his identity. When Cameron arrogantly replied that he was indeed the homeowner, the officer swiftly grabbed his arms, pulled them behind his back, and secured the steel handcuffs around his wrists. Courtney dropped her champagne glass, screaming hysterically as she rushed forward to stop them. The senior partners of the corporate finance firm watched in absolute stunned silence. Guests began pulling out their phones, recording the pristine suburban dad being read his Miranda rights in front of his entire social and professional circle. Cameron tried to struggle his face, turning a mottled shade of purple, as he shouted that there had been a massive misunderstanding, that he was a highly respected finance executive. The police did not care about his corporate title or his exclusive zip code. They marched him through his own house out the front door and shoved him into the back of the cruiser. His flawless reputation, his corporate career, and his carefully constructed facade were completely annihilated in less than 5 minutes. I was just finishing my second cup of coffee when my phone began to vibrate violently across my kitchen island. The caller ID flashed with my sister Melanie name. I let it ring for a few seconds, savoring the absolute peace of my apartment before I finally pressed accept. "You psychotic, vindictive monster!" Melanie shrieked into the phone, her voice so loud I had to pull the device away from my ear. The background noise sounded chaotic, like she was hyperventilating while pacing around her house. "Do you have any idea what you just did? The police just dragged Cameron out of his own backyard in handcuffs. His boss was there. The entire neighborhood saw him get arrested like a common criminal." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "He is a common criminal, Melanie," I replied, my voice completely flat and unbothered. "He stole my credit card information and tried to commit a $30,000 fraud. The police are just doing their job. He is your brother." Melanie screamed, her panic reaching a fever pitch. "You ruined his life over money you do not even need. You humiliated our entire family. Mom is having a literal panic attack, and Dad is calling every defense attorney in the city. You better call the police right now and drop the charges, or I swear to God you will regret it." "I am not dropping anything," I said coldly. He made his choice. Melanie let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. "You think you are so smart with your little real estate business?" She spat, venom dripping from every word. "You think you have all the power now? Well, guess what? Dad just got off the phone with the family lawyer. Since you want to play dirty and send your own flesh and blood to jail, Dad is officially removing you from the family trust fund. That $2 million from Grandpa is gone. You will not see a single red cent of that inheritance. We are cutting you off completely." A genuine laugh bubbled up from my chest, escaping my lips before I could stop it. The threat was so beautifully, perfectly misguided. "You are going to cut me out of the trust fund?" I asked, letting a heavy silence fall over the line for just a moment. I smiled, staring out at the skyline from my penthouse window. "You should really ask Dad if that fund actually exists anymore, Melanie, because you are all in for a very rude awakening." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute perfection. I could practically hear the gears grinding in Melanie's head as she tried to process my words. For her entire life, she had believed our father was a financial god, a man of unlimited resources who held the ultimate trump card over my head. The $2 million trust fund left to me by my grandfather had been the stick my parents used to beat me into submission for years. Behave or lose the trust. Choose a respectable career or lose the trust. Attend the country club dinners and smile or lose the trust. "What do you mean if it exists?" Melanie finally stammered, her voice stripped of its previous venom. "Dad manages it. It is locked in an untouchable account until you turn 35 next year. You are just lying to scare me because you know you went too far with Cameron." "I am not trying to scare you, Melanie," I said softly, leaning against the cool glass of my penthouse window. "I am telling you to wake up and look at the people you idolize. Ask Dad to show you the bank statements. Ask him to log into the portal. If he is so eager to disinherit me, tell him to prove the money is actually there to withhold. Have a wonderful weekend." I ended the call and tossed my phone onto the marble kitchen island. My heart beat with a steady rhythmic calm. I did not feel an ounce of guilt. For years I had played the role of the dutiful punching bag, allowing them to dangle my own inheritance in front of me like a carrot. They thought they held my financial future hostage. They had absolutely no idea that I had outgrown their little game a long time ago. I walked into my home office and ran my hand over the polished mahogany desk. My grandfather had been the only person in that family who saw my potential. He was a self-made man who built a logistics empire from the ground up, and he recognized that same relentless drive in me. When he passed away, he left $2 million explicitly for my future. But he made one fatal mistake. He appointed my father Harrison as the financial executor until I reached the age of 35. My father, with his pristine suits and country club memberships, was nothing but an empty shell. He was a man obsessed with an image he could no longer afford. And when his banking career stagnated, his gambling debts and lavish lifestyle caught up with him. I picked up my phone again and dialed the only person I trusted completely. Gavin answered on the first ring. His deep, resonant voice instantly grounded me. "Is it done?" Gavin asked. "Cameron was arrested 30 minutes ago," I replied, walking over to my wall safe. The police pulled him straight out of his son's birthday party in front of half the corporate executives in the city. Melanie just called me having a complete meltdown. She tried to use the trust fund to threaten me into dropping the charges. Gavin let out a low, appreciative laugh. "That is incredibly predictable. Did you tell her?" "I gave her a hint," I said, entering the code into the keypad of my safe. "I told her to ask Harrison if the money was even there." He is going to panic, Gavin. Once Melanie starts demanding to see the trust documentation to prove I have been disinherited, he is going to realize his decade of embezzlement is about to be exposed. He is going to call an emergency family meeting to try and control the narrative. I pulled a thick bound dossier from the safe and dropped it onto my desk. The cover bore the logo of one of the most ruthless forensic accounting firms in the country. "Let him call the meeting." Gavin said, his tone shifting into sharp legal precision. "We have been preparing for this exact scenario for 6 months. The forensic auditors traced every single unauthorized withdrawal Harrison made. He drained your grandfather's trust to pay for his private golf club fees, to cover Cameron's bad stock bets, and to put the down payment on Melanie's suburban mansion. The account currently has a balance of less than $500. It is completely decimated. He is going to try to intimidate me," I told Gavin, flipping through the pages of the audit. "He will bring his personal lawyer. He will wave some fake documents in my face and demand I sign away my rights in exchange for his forgiveness. He still thinks I am the naive 22-year-old girl he kicked out of the house. Then we show him the new reality," Gavin replied smoothly. "I already have the physical copies of the audit printed and bound. I also drafted the civil litigation paperwork for breach of fiduciary duty and grand larceny. The second he tries to hold that empty trust fund over your head, we drop the atomic bomb. We will dismantle his entire financial existence." I smiled, staring down at the irrefutable evidence of my father's crimes. My family had always weaponized money to demand my loyalty. They believed that holding the purse strings gave them the right to treat me like garbage. But they fundamentally misunderstood how money actually worked. They spent it on depreciating assets and fleeting social status. I used it to build an untouchable empire. "Are you ready for this, Sydney?" Gavin asked, his voice softening with genuine care. "Once we walk into that room and lay these cards on the table, there is no going back. Your relationship with them will be permanently destroyed. It was destroyed the moment they told me to stay home and act as their unpaid maid," I answered without hesitation. "It was destroyed the moment Cameron stole my credit card. They burned the bridge, Gavin. I am just calling in the demolition crew to clear the rubble." "Good," he said firmly. "I will be at your place in 20 minutes. We need to go over the final legal strategy. When Harrison calls, we will dictate the terms of engagement." I disconnected the call and closed the dossier. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the city skyline. Below me, millions of people were going about their lives completely unaware of the absolute destruction about to rain down on the family legacy. Suddenly, my phone screen lit up with an incoming email. The sender was my father. The subject line read, "Urgent Family Meeting, Mandatory Attendance." I opened the email. It was a formal summons demanding my immediate presence at his private attorney's office the following morning. The message stated that due to my unforgivable actions regarding my brother, my father was officially initiating the legal process to strip me of my inheritance and remove me from the family trust. He ordered me to appear and sign the relinquishment forms or face total excommunication. I did not feel fear. I felt a profound, overwhelming sense of anticipation. My father was marching blindly onto a battlefield he did not understand, armed with an empty gun. He wanted to officially discuss my inheritance. I sent a 2-word reply: "See you tomorrow." The stage was set. The trap was fully loaded. Tomorrow I would not just burn their false narrative to the ground. I would salt the earth so nothing they loved could ever grow there again. The downtown offices of Kensington and Associates were designed to intimidate. From the sweeping views of the city skyline to the heavy mahogany conference table, everything in the room screamed old money and absolute authority. When I pushed open the double glass doors with Gavin right beside me, the atmosphere inside was already suffocatingly tense. My father, Harrison, sat at the head of the long table wearing his bespoke navy suit. He had carefully arranged his features into a mask of disappointed patriarch authority. My mother, Catherine, sat to his right, clutching a designer handbag tightly against her chest, as if I might try to steal it. My sister, Melanie, was pacing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, her arms crossed tightly, glaring daggers at me the second I walked into the room. At my farther left sat a man in his late 50s with slicked-back hair and a condescending smile. He was exactly the kind of overpriced private attorney wealthy men hire to bully people into submission. "You are exactly 14 minutes late," my father said, tapping his gold watch. "I see you brought a friend. This is a private family legal matter, Sydney. He needs to wait outside." Gavin did not even blink. He pulled out a leather chair for me before taking the seat right next to mine. He placed his sleek black briefcase on the polished wood surface. "I am not a friend," Gavin stated, his voice resonating with the kind of effortless command that instantly shifted the power dynamic in the room. "I am managing partner at Vanguard Mergers and Acquisitions, and I am here serving as chief legal counsel for my client, Sydney. We will be conducting this meeting on our terms, Harrison." The lawyer let out a short, patronizing laugh. "Look here, son," he sneered, leaning forward and resting his elbows on the table. "I do not care what corporate firm you claim to represent. We are dealing with a familial trust dispute and a deeply disturbed young woman who has falsely accused her brother of a crime. We are here to offer a graceful exit strategy before we destroy her financially." Melanie slammed her hands down on the back of a leather chair. "You had Cameron locked in a holding cell overnight," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the glass walls. "His wife is having a complete nervous breakdown. You ruined his life. You owe this family a massive apology, and you are going to march down to the precinct and drop those ridiculous charges right now." I looked at my sister, then turned my gaze to my mother, who was shaking her head in theatrical disgust. I simply smiled. "I owe you nothing, Melanie. Cameron committed a felony. He made his bed and now he can sleep on a metal cot." My father slammed his fist onto the mahogany table. "Enough," he roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. "You have lost your mind, Sydney. You have disrespected your mother, you ruined our anniversary, and you tried to destroy your brother. I am the executor of your grandfather's trust fund. I hold the keys to your future. Since you have proven yourself to be a vindictive, ungrateful child, I am officially triggering the behavioral clause of the trust." The lawyer slid a thick stack of legal documents across the table toward me. He tapped a gold pen against the signature line. "This is a relinquishment form," the lawyer explained, his tone dripping with fake sympathy. "By signing this, you admit that your actions regarding your brother were a misunderstanding, and you agree to drop all criminal charges immediately. You also agree to a non-disclosure clause regarding the events of last night. If you sign this, your father is willing to be merciful. He will keep you in the will and allow you to access the $2 million trust fund when you turn 35. My mother leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Take the deal, Sydney. It is the only way you will ever see a dime of that money. You have always been the difficult child, but your father is giving you one last chance to be part of this family. Sign the paper and fix the mess you made." My father crossed his arms, leaning back in his chair with a look of absolute triumph. "You thought you were so powerful last night, canceling our vacation?" he mocked. "But real power is capital, Sydney. I control $2 million of your money. You are going to sign that paper. You are going to drop the charges against Cameron. And then you are going to beg this family for forgiveness. If you refuse, I will legally dissolve your portion of the trust today. You will leave this office with absolutely nothing." I looked down at the relinquishment form. The paper was crisp, the legal jargon dense and intimidating. For a split second, I imagined what the old me would have done. The 22-year-old girl they kicked out onto the street would have been terrified by this display of wealth and authority. She would have believed their threats. She would have signed her soul away just to keep the peace. But I was not that girl anymore. I was a CEO. I managed hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate assets, and I knew exactly how to dismantle a bully. I gently pushed the relinquishment form back across the table. I am not signing anything, I said, my voice dangerously calm. And I am certainly not dropping the felony charges against your golden boy. My father's face contorted with rage. You stupid, arrogant girl, he spat. I am wiping out your trust fund right now. You are disinherited. Gavin let out a low, sharp laugh that cut through the tension in the room like a knife. You cannot disinherit someone from an empty bank account, Gavin said, his voice devoid of any warmth. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a massive, heavy binder. It was over 300 pages thick, bound in black leather, with a stark white label on the front. Gavin lifted it high and slammed it down onto the center of the mahogany conference table. The loud, echoing thud made my mother physically jump in her seat. The lawyer frowned, staring at the binder. What is this garbage, he demanded. That, Gavin replied, leaning forward and looking dead into my father's eyes, is an independent forensic audit of the Grandfather Trust Fund, commissioned by Sydney and executed by the top financial fraud investigators in the state. My father's face instantly drained of all color. The smug arrogance that had defined his entire existence vanished completely, replaced by stark, naked terror. He stared at the black binder as if it were a live explosive. Let us talk about real power, Harrison, I said, resting my hands on the table and leaning in. Let us talk about what happens when an executor breaches his fiduciary duty to fund his country club lifestyle and pay off his son's gambling debts. Shall we open the first page, or do you want to explain to your lawyer why you called us here to negotiate over a trust fund that you secretly drained dry 10 years ago? Gavin did not wait for my father to formulate another lie. He flipped the heavy cover of the binder open. The sound cracked through the dead silence of the conference room like a gunshot. He bypassed the introductory pages and went straight for the highlighted bank statements. Let us review the timeline of your financial genius. Gavin began, his voice projecting absolute authority. 10 years ago, when Sydney was still paying her way through community college by working night shifts, you made your first unauthorized withdrawal. $50,000 transferred directly into a private account to settle a debt at a high-stakes casino. 6 months later, another $40,000 went to cover your membership dues at the Oak Ridge Country Club. My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish suffocating on dry land. The high-priced lawyer sitting next to him had suddenly stopped tapping his gold pen. The lawyer leaned over, straining to see the documents Gavin was holding. But the most interesting transactions happened exactly 7 years ago. Gavin continued, pulling a specific document from the binder and sliding it across the mahogany table. $250,000 wired directly to an escrow account. The exact amount used as a down payment for a 5-bedroom property in the wealthy suburbs. A house currently deeded to Melanie and her husband Bradley. Melanie gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. She stared at the paper as if it were soaked in poison. The color drained from her perfectly manicured face. That is a lie, she whispered, her voice trembling violently. Dad told Bradley and me that the down payment was an early inheritance advance from his personal investment portfolio. He said it was a gift to help us start our family. It was not a gift, Melanie, I said, leaning back in my chair and watching her world crumble. It was grand larceny. Your perfect suburban life, your matching SUVs, and your perfectly decorated nursery were all funded by money stolen directly from my name. You have been living in a house bought with stolen funds. The private attorney abruptly stood up, pushing his leather chair back so forcefully it scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. He snapped his briefcase shut. Harrison, you explicitly told me this was a standard behavioral dispute over a fully funded trust. The lawyer said, his voice tight with barely contained fury. You deliberately withheld the fact that you committed massive financial fraud. I am an estate lawyer, not a criminal defense attorney for embezzlement. As of this exact second, I no longer represent you. Do not contact my office again. He turned and marched out of the glass doors without looking back. The departure of the highly paid bulldog lawyer shattered whatever illusion of control my parents still clung to. My mother, Catherine, let out a high-pitched wail. She clutched my father's arm, her designer rings digging into his expensive suit jacket. "Harrison, tell them it is a mistake," she cried hysterically. "Tell them you moved the money to a different account for safekeeping. Tell them you were protecting the family assets." My father could not speak. The forensic audit was bulletproof. Every wire transfer, every fake invoice, every forged authorization form was documented, cross-referenced, and verified. The trust fund, which should have accumulated millions in interest over the past decade, currently held a balance of exactly $492. Melanie suddenly snapped. The realization that she was legally and financially implicated in a massive felony completely broke her carefully constructed facade. She lunged forward, slamming her hands on the table and screaming directly at our parents. "Are you out of your minds?" Melanie shrieked, her voice breaking into a hysterical screech. "You bought my house with stolen money. Bradley is a corporate executive. If his firm finds out his home was purchased with embezzled funds, he will lose his job. He will divorce me. The IRS will seize my property. You made me an accessory to a federal crime." "We did it for you, Melanie," my mother sobbed, reaching out to grab her daughter's hand. "We wanted you to have a beautiful home for the grandchildren." Sydney did not need the money back then. She was just a kid selling cheap houses. We were family. We were supposed to share. Melanie violently ripped her hand away from our mother, stepping back as if she were disgusted by her own flesh and blood. "Do not touch me." Melanie spat, her eyes wide with sheer panic. "I am not going down for your pathetic financial failure. Cameron is already sitting in a jail cell because of your stupid games, and now you are dragging me into federal tax fraud. I will testify against both of you if I have to. I will tell the police everything. I am not losing my children and my marriage because you wanted to pretend you were still rich." Watching the golden child violently turn on her creators was a spectacle I will never forget. For years, Melanie had basked in their favoritism, perfectly happy to watch them throw me out into the street. Now that the consequences of their greed were knocking on her front door, she was ready to throw them to the wolves without a single second of hesitation. My father, realizing he was completely abandoned by his lawyer and his favorite daughter, suddenly stopped trembling. A dark, ugly shadow passed over his face. The panicked old man vanished, and the ruthless, manipulative banker I had always feared resurfaced. He stood up slowly, straightening his suit jacket and placing his hands flat on the table. "You think you have won, Harrison," said his voice dropping to a deadly quiet register. "You think you can walk in here with your fancy lawyer and your little audit and destroy my life. You think I am just going to roll over and let you send me to federal prison." I looked up at him, completely unfazed. "You sent yourself to prison, Dad. I just brought the receipts." Harrison let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "You have always been too smart for your own good, Sydney." He sneered, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. "But you missed one very important detail about how banking actually works. You forgot about the small starter home you bought 5 years ago when you were struggling to get your real estate license, the one you were so proud of buying all by yourself." I narrowed my eyes, maintaining my composure, but a tiny spike of caution flared in my chest. "You needed a guarantor for that mortgage because your credit history was too thin," my father continued, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "I graciously signed that paperwork for you. But what you did not know is that I used my power of attorney over your trust to cross-collateralize your property against my own massive business loans. I tied your little starter house directly to my corporate debts." He leaned across the table, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. "If you take that audit to the police, I will go to jail. But the very second I am indicted, I will completely default on every single one of my corporate loans. The bank will immediately trigger the cross-collateralization clause. They will foreclose on your property, Sydney. They will seize the very first asset you ever built, and they will liquidate it to cover my debts. You might put me in handcuffs, but I will drag your personal real estate portfolio straight down to hell with me. Drop the investigation right now, or I will let the bank take everything you own." The silence that followed my father's declaration was so absolute, you could hear the faint hum of the city traffic 14 floors below. He stood there with his chest puffed out, breathing heavily, with a twisted smile of victory plastered across his face. He truly believed he had just delivered a checkmate. In his mind, he was still the untouchable patriarch, a financial mastermind who could crush his disobedient daughter with a single signature. He expected me to crumble to cry, to beg him to spare the very first piece of real estate I had ever purchased. He thought the threat of foreclosure was the ultimate weapon that would force me back into submission. I looked at the man who shared my DNA and felt absolutely nothing. No fear, no anger, just a profound, overwhelming sense of pity for how incredibly small and desperate he really was. I leaned back in my leather chair, crossing my legs and folding my hands neatly in my lap. I looked him dead in the eye and gave a casual, effortless shrug. "Do it," I said, my voice perfectly steady and devoid of any emotion. My father's victorious smile faltered. His brow furrowed in deep confusion. "What did you just say?" he demanded, his voice losing a massive fraction of its booming confidence. "I said, do it, Harrison," I repeated, pronouncing his first name with deliberate coldness. "Let the bank foreclose on the property. Let them seize it. Let them auction it off to the highest bidder. Call your loan officer right now and trigger the default. I honestly do not care." "You are bluffing," my mother hissed, gripping the edge of the mahogany table so hard her knuckles turned white. "You worked 3 jobs to buy that little house. You cried when you got the keys. You would never just let it go. You are just trying to call our bluff." "That was 5 years ago, Mom," I replied, turning my calm gaze to her terrified face. "I was 29 years old, and that house was my entire world. But I am 34 now. I am the chief executive officer of a luxury real estate fund. I manage commercial and residential properties worth tens of millions of dollars. Do you honestly think a starter home in the suburbs is going to break me financially? Do you think I am going to let you steal $2 million from my grandfather just to save a single property worth a fraction of that amount? You can let the bank burn that house to the ground for all I care. It is completely irrelevant to my net worth." My father sank slowly back into his chair, the brutal reality of his powerlessness finally crashing down on him. The threat of foreclosure, the cross-collateralization, the financial blackmail, it was all entirely useless. He had fired his biggest, most destructive weapon, and it had bounced off me without leaving a single scratch. Gavin stood up smoothly, buttoning his tailored suit jacket. He picked up the heavy black binder containing the forensic audit and slipped it back into his briefcase. The sound of the metallic clasps snapping shut echoed through the room like a judge's gavel, final and absolute. "Since you have made your position clear," Harrison Gavin stated, his professional tone slicing through the heavy air, "we will proceed with the immediate filing of civil litigation for breach of fiduciary duty. Simultaneously, the complete forensic audit will be handed over to the federal authorities regarding the embezzlement of the trust. I highly suggest you retain criminal defense counsel immediately. You are going to need it to avoid a lengthy federal prison sentence." "No," Melanie screamed, suddenly lunging across the table. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled, and her designer dress was wrinkled. "You cannot do this, Sydney. Bradley will leave me. He will take Mason and Lily. I will lose everything because of them." She pointed a shaking finger at our parents, her face contorted in panic. "Please, Sydney. I will testify against them. I will sign whatever you want. Just do not let the federal agents take my house." I looked at my sister, the golden child who had spent her entire life mocking my career and treating me like the family servant. I watched her beg, completely unraveling at the thought of losing her precious suburban status and her wealthy husband. "You should have thought about that before you accepted a stolen house, Melanie," I said, picking up my designer purse. "You should have asked questions when Dad magically produced $250,000 for your down payment. You were incredibly happy to reap the financial benefits of his fraud, while I was struggling to survive on instant ramen. Actions have severe consequences. Welcome to yours." I turned my back on them and walked toward the glass doors. But right before I pushed them open, I paused and glanced over my shoulder. My parents were sitting there, completely broken, facing the terrifying reality of federal prison and absolute financial ruin. But I knew that a prison cell was not what scared them the most. What terrified Harrison and Catherine more than anything else in the entire world was losing their elite social standing. They lived for the validation of their wealthy peers. They existed solely for the country club dinners, the charity galas, and the envious stares of their high society friends. "Oh, and Mom," I said casually, keeping my hand resting on the glass door. "I noticed you are hosting the annual charity brunch at the Oak Ridge Country Club this coming weekend. I saw the lavish event posted online. I believe you are the keynote speaker aiming to raise funds for the new hospital wing." My mother froze, her eyes widening in pure, unadulterated panic. "What are you going to do?" she whispered, her voice shaking so badly it was barely audible. I smiled, a genuine bright smile. "I am going to attend." "Of course," I replied. "It is a public charity event, and I have always been a very generous donor. I cannot wait to see you and Dad there. I am sure all your elite country club friends will be absolutely thrilled to hear about Cameron getting arrested for credit card fraud last night. And I know they will be even more fascinated to hear about the impending federal investigation into your finances. It will definitely be a brunch to remember." I pushed the heavy glass doors open and walked out, leaving them trapped in their own self-made hell. The threat of legal action had destroyed their financial future, but the threat of public social execution was the true death blow. I stepped into the elevator with Gavin, the doors sliding shut behind us. I took a deep breath, feeling an incredible surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. The legal battle was secured, but the real war was just beginning. I was going to strip away the only thing they valued more than money. I was going to tear down their flawless social facade right in the middle of their sacred country club, and I was going to make sure every single member of the elite society they worshipped watched them burn to the ground. The Sunday morning sun poured through the massive arched windows of the Oak Ridge Country Club, casting a golden glow over the pristine golf course. Inside the grand ballroom, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of expensive floral arrangements, imported perfumes, and absolute desperation. My parents had pulled out all the stops for their annual charity brunch. Crystal glasses clinked together as waiters in crisp white uniforms glided effortlessly across the room, serving mimosas and caviar appetizers. To the untrained eye, it looked like a standard gathering of the suburban elite. But I knew the truth. This was not a charity event. It was a high society rescue mission. Harrison and Catherine were cornered animals, putting on the performance of a lifetime. Cameron was still sitting in a county holding cell, his bail set at an astronomical figure due to the severe flight risk and the sheer scale of his attempted credit card fraud. My parents were completely bankrupt. Their accounts were frozen, their credit lines were maxed out, and their precious reputation was hanging by a single frayed thread. They needed liquid cash immediately to secure a high-powered defense attorney for their golden boy, and to desperately plug the gaping holes in their own sinking financial ship. I stood quietly in the lavish foyer of the country club, shielded by a large marble pillar, observing the room before making my presence known. I could see my mother holding court at a central table surrounded by the wealthiest wives in the neighborhood. Catherine wore a pristine pastel dress, her hair styled to perfection, but her hands gripped her champagne flute so tightly her knuckles were white. She was playing the role of the tragic, long-suffering matriarch to absolute perfection. "It has just been a living nightmare." My mother sighed heavily, pressing a lace handkerchief to her dry eyes. "You all know how much Harrison and I have sacrificed for our children. We gave them everything. But my youngest daughter, Sydney, she has always been deeply troubled. She has struggled with severe mental health issues since she was a teenager. We tried to get her help, we truly did, but she refused all treatment and completely alienated herself from the family out of pure spite." The women around the table leaned in closer, their eyes wide with morbid curiosity. They fed on country club gossip